If you've been teaching any amount of time, you probably heard that the first week or two, you need to go over the rules and procedures with your students. I gotta tell you, I could not agree with that more. I agree with that 120%. In fact, I believe it so much, I actually spent the first 2 weeks going over the rules and procedures with my students. So you might ask yourself, what exactly does that look like? Yeah, I've heard that many times and everything else, but how does it actually look in the classroom? And that's the purpose of this video. I want to kind of take you through my first 2 weeks and go line by line exactly what I do each day so you see how I can implement that in my classroom, because I'm a strong believer in classroom management. I'm a strong believer in going over the rules and procedures, because I believe to my core that if you put the time and effort in at the beginning, you're going to see great results all year long. So come along with me as I go over my first 2 weeks, but first, let's go ahead and play that intro. I already created many videos that talk about different things I do in my classroom. So as I'm going through my first 2 weeks, if there's something I do that I already created a video for, I'll mention it, and you can look down below to actually click on that link so you get more details about that specific activity, that specific procedure I do in my classroom. But let's start from the beginning. So here we go. It'd probably be helpful to know that my classes are roughly about 15 minutes long. And during the first week or two of school, the schedule changed a little bit, but just to make things simple, let's say my classes are 50 minutes long on each thing, and I have roughly about 35 students, and I teach 8th grade history, and so that's kind of the framework I apply all this to. So on the first day of school, students will come into the classroom, and I just tell them, go ahead and sit anywhere for now, but don't get too comfortable because we're going to move seats here in about a minute or two. Then once all the students come in, at that point in time, what I do is I tell them that I'm going to point to a desk, and when I point to that desk, if I say a student's name, that student is supposed to move to that desk. And if you're sitting in that seat, just kind of get up and move to the back and wait for your name to be called. And so I'll go through the room and I'll keep pointing to the desk and saying students' names. And once again, before the students even come to the classroom, this is the day before, or the whole prepping before, I actually have assigned seating. So I already put the students in specific spots, and the assigned seating is there from day one. And I'll leave a link below. Man, the seating chart is my bread and butter. The seating chart is where I store my information. The seating chart clipboard, that is the core of my classroom. So I actually create a whole video of that. So as I mentioned, I'll put a link down below so you can click on that. So just click down below for a seating chart, and then you can pull up an entire video about what I do with my seating chart. But once the students are in, point to the desk, they move, and then when that's all done, I'll walk from student to student, just to confirm I got the right student in the correct spot. And also at that point in time, I can make adjustments to their names or change however they want to be pronounced and everything. And then that's finalized, then I do my roll. And so that's kind of the start of the first day. Then the rest of the day, I use that to tell students about myself. I mean, I go through, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I got pretty much stories for everything I do as far as procedures, but I'll tell them, about my name, Mr. Vigil, and I got a story about, how I learned my name, Mr. Vigil, and I kind of go through my family, my wife and the kids and the pets and everything else. I put pictures of the pets up there for them. We do all that. And then towards the end, I let students know that everything in my class counts for points, even participation. If they raise their hand, they get points. And usually that's enough to stimulate some students responding. And so what I do at the end of class is I do a quick pop quiz, and I ask them questions. What's my name? And raise their hand. I give them points, and then I ask, what's the name of my kids, my dogs, how long have I been teaching for? And I go through all the things. So everything I covered that day, I do a pop quiz at the end, and I assign points as I do that. Once again, back to my whole seating chart process. But what's great about the first day is students get to know me. That's number one. And number two, they get a feel for the classroom. They understand that if they participate, they're going to be rewarded with extra credit points. And so those two things are already procedures that are kind of being put in place on the very first day. But once again, that core is that seating chart. That is the core of everything. Now, one thing I don't do is I don't do icebreakers. I explain this to the kids. I don't do icebreakers. And the reason I don't do icebreakers is because for me, actually, I'm quite a bit of an introvert. And I explained to them that for me, I don't like icebreakers. And I'm sure there's many students in the class that don't like icebreakers. And for me, one of the worst things to do is kind of put students in these first day in these groups, and they kind of just stare at each other, feeling so uncomfortable. And so I avoid that altogether. So I spend that first day just kind of sharing with the students about myself. Day two, I use this day to introduce students to what I want them to get out of the class. And my spiel, my verbiage, my philosophy, I actually call this my philosophy, is that what I want students to get out of my class, is not necessarily to learn history. I want them to learn history. I teach history. I want them to learn history, but that's not my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is for them to think about the world differently, think about themselves differently, just to question what is right, what is wrong. And as I go through the year, I have all these different questions that keep tying back into this. But that's my goal, is to get them to think about the world a little differently. And of course, I have stories that tie in with this. And I kind of explain to them that when I was little, I saw the world black and white, but the older I get, I see it's more of a gray. And so I tell them I want to explore that gray area in this class. I want to, and I love this saying. My friend said this to me many years ago, and I use it with my students all the time. Do you really believe what you say you believe? And I'm questioning students on that all the time. Do you really believe what you say you believe? And so I tell them we're going to explore that question, and hopefully by the time the school is over, they'll have a better idea of what exactly they believe. And that's kind of my philosophy. Now, tied in with that is I have something called the Nakarima. And once again, I have a whole video about how I use that in class, and I'll put down below that as well, about the Nakarima. But that is a great activity. And what it is it teaches, it's a story about this weird people, culture, and takes them through all those weird things that they do. But then at the end, we eventually learn that those weird people are actually us, not Korean so backwards as American. And so I use that as a way to get students kind of change their frame of thinking, change what they believe, change their thought process. And it's great to see the expression at the end when they realize, oh my gosh, these weird people are actually us. So that's day 2, my philosophy. Day 3, and we haven't even talked about history yet. And we're not going to learn about history for about another 2 weeks. And so day 3 is when I start my syllabus. I'll spend 2 whole days on my syllabus. Now what I did, originally I used to give them this a regular syllabus, and we read it and they sign at the bottom and all that good stuff, but I actually created 2 versions of the syllabus. One is the original version, and the other version is the student version. And in the student version, what I do is I create spaces in there where they have to fill in the blanks. So that way I get more student participation. And of course, as we go along, students raise their hand, participation points, and everything else. And so that kind of facilitates and helps this more student interaction. But that's what I do with day 3, is I just cover the syllabus. And I will actually put a link down below. If you actually want to download a copy of my syllabus, just so you have as a reference, I'll make sure I include a link down below once again, so you can just put your information in and I'll get you a copy of that. But that is all I cover on day 3. And to be honest with you, that's all I actually cover on day 4. Day 4, I kind of finish up the syllabus as well. So day 3 and 4 are dedicated to the syllabus. Day 5, this is where I take students through my room. This is where I walk students through my room, and literally I'll start in one corner and I'll just kind of walk around. As I walk around, I'll explain different things in the classroom. In fact, you may be able to take some footage of my classroom as well, so you can see what I do or see what I'm talking about as I go along. But I'll basically start in one corner. I'll talk about the thermostat. Hey, don't touch the thermostat, and how next thing how I use this board over here, a bulletin board, for them to see what's going on. And then we got the TV monitor for them not to touch the TV monitor. And then we got the timer, and the timer is always going, and it's a way of keeping students on track. I'm a strong believer in timer. My wife does or did CrossFit for a long time, and they always use a timer, and I thought that's perfect, so I implement that in my classroom. Anytime we do an activity, there's a timer going, so students have a visual cue on how much longer they have to do, so it helps them not waste as much time. And then I move on to something called students versus teachers. I won't go into much detail about that. Once again, there's a whole video dedicated to that, and I'll put that below for student versus teachers. But I go over that in quite a bit of detail because that is a way I use as classroom management, as a classroom management process or procedure, and it helps out quite a bit. And then from there we go into the different bins that I have. Now another video coming your way. I'll put it down below on how I use these bins, definitely the in bin to kind of be my catch-all for things. But then I talk about the in bin, how students will put things in that, and then the different bins, and the pencil, and then the sharpener, and then what else is there? So keep going around. Then the board in the back, and the board in the back is where gives them the calendar for the week. And then we dive into extra credit. We talked a little bit about extra credit as far as where it's at on the board. And then I finish off talking about the Chromebook. Now the Chromebook, same thing, video down below on how I use the Chromebook in my class as far as how students get the Chromebooks and return the Chromebooks. But all that is in this day. It keeps, once again, it just it helps students understand where things are at in a classroom, as well as different processes and procedures in the classroom as well. And so that is that day. So that is 1 week down. Now on to week 2. Once again, I want to stress, haven't talked anything about history yet. So once again, this is how crucial this is in my class. So now we move on to day 6. And so these day 6, the purpose of this is to talk about 2 different activities or things we have in the class. Will be all year round. One is the extra credit. And so we at this point in time, we practice grabbing our Chromebooks. And so we'll practice grabbing our Chromebooks some more, and then students will grab their Chromebooks. But also from here, at this point in time, I show students where to find the extra credit. And for extra credit, I use the book online. It's a digital version of our book online, and that's how they complete the extra credit. So we go through that, I show them where that's at, and that's part of the class. And then the other part of the class is I go over the homework. For the homework, I have this packet that I use as my homework. What's nice about the packet is the condensed information. It is maybe like 8 pages a week. Quite simple to do. It probably takes no more than half an hour to complete. And so it gives the students plenty of time to work on it. But the homework itself is that we go over that. I kind of let them know how to do the homework, and then I give them actually time at the end of class so they can start the homework. So that way they see that it's really not that difficult to complete. So on day 6, I combine 2 things. One is extra credit, so we know how to do that and what that looks like, and then homework, so they know how to do the homework and what that looks like, and also give a little time to work on that homework. So that is day 6. Day 7, day 8, and day 9. Ooh, these are 3 days, 3 whole days. I commit 3 whole days. We are working on warm-up procedures. Once again, link down below. Take a look at that for warm-up procedures. But for me, a warm-up procedure is what students do when they first come into class. I am a strong believer that you need to have something for students to work on when they first come into class. For different reasons. It gives you time to take care of your teacher business. So what that means is if students are working on something, you can use the first 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes of class to do attendance, put down any fires that might be coming up, getting kind of passing you to take care of, whatever else it might be. It gives you those few minutes at the beginning of class to take care of housekeeping things. But if students don't have something to work on, they're not trained to come in and work on something right away, you can quickly find the class going into chaos, and that just funnels through the rest of the class period. So I start the class strong, and so we spend 3 whole days on how to do our warm-up procedures. And what that looks like is they will, so on this day, I'll kind of talk about one warm-up procedure, and we'll practice that over and over. And then another kind of warm-up procedure, and we'll practice that over and over. And then a third kind, and we practice that over and over. So we're practicing what it's going to look like when they first come to class. 3 whole days I'm committing to that. And then part of that is also how they set up their paper, because we're going to be doing Cornell notes in the class. So I go over how to do Cornell notes. So how we do Cornell notes while we're doing our warm-ups. So we take care of that. And then at the end of the 3rd day, the other big part of it is I show them how the work is going to be graded. And we actually grade the papers together. They grade each other's papers. And so that way students have a big picture, one of what they do when they first come into class. That's probably the most important thing to do. Next is how the paper is going to be set up for not just warm-ups, but Cornell notes. So that's the other thing we do. And the last thing is the point. So that way students actually, because you know how many times the students turn things in and they have no idea how to fix their grade at all? At the end of almost every assignment, I'll let students know this is worth this many points, and this is the grade you got on this assignment, depending upon how many points you earn. And students will actually see that on day 3 of doing our warm-up procedures. So 3 days committed to the warm procedures. And the last day of week 2, so this is what, day 10? Day 10 is when I start my activity. I call it the map packet activity. I guess a good way of saying it. Map skills activity, geographical skills. And so I actually go through it. It's like a week and a half long process, week and a half long packet that they'll work on. And so I actually introduce that to them on the 10th day, or the first 10th day of class. I introduce that to them. But then also that day, the last procedure that we go over is how they're to work in Google Classroom. And so I use that day to talk about Google Classroom. I use that day to talk about how their assignments will be assigned in Google Classroom. Specifically, something I use is called Ed Puzzles. And so we talk about how the Ed Puzzles be assigned in Google Classroom, what that's going to look like, how they know what to work on. So the 10th day, even though we're kind of starting, it's a little bit, the first real history assignment is actually really used to focus upon those procedures of understanding how to use that Google Classroom. Once again, and in fact, that map activity, oh, it's a great activity. I'll put a link down below. Once again, I really don't want to get into that till like the 3rd week, but if you want to see what that looks like, I'll put a link down below so you can check out the video on what I do with that map activity. But that is my first 2 weeks. As you can see, all of it is routines and procedures and rules. Routine, procedures, and rules. And I tell you, I wouldn't do it any other way because I see the benefit of that. If you put the effort in now at the beginning, as tedious as it is, you're going to see great results later on, as long as you stick with the process. Well, I hope that was helpful. Hey, if you want any more tips and tricks of the trade, just click on one of the links above here. And hey, look forward to working with you soon. Have a great day.